Guys, how's it going? I am Alex Koseri, and I'm here talking about an intro to get us started on this podcast. With me
Uh,
is Chase Lindley. How are you doing, Chase?
I'm good. I have the most resilient spinal vertebra that anyone has. The most resilient spinal column, I think, in this hemisphere.
I
Yeah,
believe that. I
I
think,
know. I'm jacked as shit. Constantly injecting insulin into my butthole. But yeah, it's your boys. It's Chase and Alex. This week we're going to be covering training for females and form checks. Chase, who are you? What do you do?
I'm Chase Lindley, head coach at Starting Strength Oklahoma City here in Oklahoma. Um, I am a starting strength coach. I've been a starting strength coach for about 2 years now, and I train a wide variety of people. Just kind of got into this as a young child, stumbled on a diamond in the rough with WFAC in Wichita Falls, and just been sold on it ever since.
Chase, actually, I don't know if you know this. You became an SSA. You technically got yours on January 1st. I got mine on January 2nd of the
Really?
same
So, in
year.
the thing, I thought it was, it said like December 31st, and it was like almost midnight because I remember that on New Year's Eve celebrating.
Oh, are you? Because I think they put you on the January 1st cutoff for the
They may have.
auditing and for the maintenance cert. Because I remember looking at like the dates and everything, and it was like January 1st, Chase Lindley. I was like, no, I was
Yeah,
the
like
second one for the year.
I'll have to go back to my emails whenever like Nick sent out the, basically saying that I am a starting strength coach. And yeah, I
Hmm.
swear it was like
That
an
was a
hour
good
before
email. That was a good
that
email to
was.
get.
That
That
was
really
very nice.
was. I should ask you about your. We should do a becoming an SSE podcast at some
Yeah,
point. I think that
yeah.
might be a good move. Um, but yeah, okay. So starting strength coaches, we work for a parent company called Starting Strength. We have a pretty extensive shit testing process. Chase, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it's basically we are engineering strength training, right? In the words of Mark Ripito, he said it the best. We take the hard sciences that everyone kind of looks over and kind of doesn't really geek out on as much as we do, and we apply them to barbell training, right? And for any range of clientele, we have studied, our craft for many years, sometimes even longer than that, depending on the person, to hopefully get certified on our platform. Our testing is the most rigorous in the industry, being basically a two-part test. One being, can you coach the actual lifts in person in real time? That's a huge weeding out process. And then the second one is just a panel of three coaches, and you are just getting grilled by those three coaches, question after question, making sure that you know the material, the model, everything to do with starting strength in and out.
Yeah. The platform exam, it's a very interesting one. So essentially, you're put into a randomly assigned group of people, kind of who are of a same-ish height to you for convenience for a lot of the unracking stuff. You are given the absolute worst one, and then you are told within a very short period of time that you have to get them to do a mechanically as clean as possible lift, or as clean as that person can do, with a lot of pressure. And you oftentimes end up coaching more than one person as well. And then this is up to the level of the other starting strength coaches. So it's not just a, hey, you're our level one CrossFit coach. This is, you are at the level of the highest coaches that we are aware of in the industry. So the platform exam is really cool. The board exam, that was my favorite part. I really loved that. That was a fun casual conversation, but in reality, I think mine was like 2.5-ish hours. I want to say
Yeah.
two and a
I,
half ish, three, somewhere towards 3 hours. Of basically running you through the gauntlet of technical information, not the basic stuff. They try and stump you by a good bit to see what you're really made of, and that was fun. It was a fun time. But in short, starting strength credential, we consider it the most highly sought after one in the industry. It lets us do some cool things. And here on this show, what we try to do is kind of fill in the gaps for a lot of things that starting strength doesn't talk about as either frequently, or as in depth, that wouldn't be in like the books or something like that. So all of this stuff is in the content somewhere. We just kind of try to elucidate it, bring it to the front, and kind of condense it all into one good channel. So this time we're talking training and form training for females, and then we're doing some form checks at the end. Chase, where can we find you at on the socials?
just Instagram, Chase Lindley, or just look up starting strength gyms.okc, and then you'll see my gym here. And just shoot us a message, right? Email us, call us up, and we'll get you going.
Yeah, just Google Chase Lindley, you'll find him, and then follow his backup account at Chase_Lindley. He does online coaching, and he's pretty good at it, apparently. I do online coaching as well. You can find me at my website there, Echo Strength. And if you want to get videos on the show, because we do form checks all the time, you can email Mick at support@strength.club. And you can also have questions about the Starting Strength app. All of that stuff can be condensed there. So we'll dig into the meat for the subject. This is going to be training for females. We should probably go in this little flow chart. It's going to be about kind of getting people into the gym in the first place. So we're going to go over the common like hurdles, barriers to training, taking your first step into the gym, the most common objections and fears that people have, especially just kind of not to say that these are like sex exclusive, but for the most part, these are concentrated within the female population. And then we'll go through basically differences that could be subtle, could not be between coaching, programming, and form, kind of the three things that really we're only concerned about. So Chase, which one of these stands out? Which one do you think you're going to want to enjoy talking about the most?
Basically, it's just the common objections / fears. We deal with that a lot, just kind of trying to get people into the doors. We do an open house every Saturday, and we have some people walk in because of just general curiosity. People who've never even heard of starting strength before, and they see a bunch of guys in there lifting. Some women, but it's mostly guys dominating in our gym, and it's a kind of a big red flag whenever they first see it. But again, they don't understand what strength training can actually do and the benefits of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of jumping through that hurdle, I think I've tried to really explain a lot more to more people as I get into this.
Yeah. Working in the franchise gym setting probably kind of really cuts your teeth for those things. With online coaching on my end, it is much more rare for me to kind of have to completely explain or to sell someone on these things. So I have to deal generally with like a totally different set of objections than someone like Chase is going to have to. So that'll be interesting to talk about. But we will kind of go into the first part. Let's see how this should work. Here we go. Okay. So these aren't really in any sort of priority order for commons, barriers, and misconceptions. I would say the most important one, I think, actually is the last one. This one I didn't really think about. I just talked to Anastasia, my wife, about it, and she brought this one up as a really good point. She's saying that just there's a big information deficit and that just targeted marketing. So, like people who are doing barbell companies are not really specifically going after the female population. Things like Orange Theory and Zumba and CrossFit and, XYZ, all of the spin classes are like hyper targeted at the female population. Barbells really aren't. I kind of feel like that's the biggest thing. What do you think, Chase?
I'd have to agree. You kind of hear this all the time with like, hey, build your butt in a month, or some superficial aspect that targets just for women and that they kind of just latch onto. Whereas, if I talk about the benefits of strength training and how it affects every adaptation out there, it's just, they're lost in the weeds. It's way over the head. Even though I'm dumbing it down, making it as simple as possible, those guys have it really figured out, and they have a really good team at Orange Theory and CrossFit and all that stuff of just attacking what women kind of want.
Yeah, the marketing pitch for starting strength and really just for kind of extensive barbell training, it's always going to be longer. And I think that basically seconds matter whenever people are talking about these sound bites. So like one of Rip's best videos, I want to say it's a case for the starting strength method. He gives a presentation at some college about it. It's like an hour and a half. And even if you play it on 2x speed, you're down to like 45 minutes, which is still 44 minutes than anyone's going to pay longer than they're going to pay attention to. So kind of the information, being able to condense the message quickly, like, hey, barbells are good for everything. And then once you kind of get past that point of should you be doing barbells, there's a lot of other things that kind of come into play here. The one that I see very frequently is that all weights are heavier. All weights are heavier than I think they appear to be. So like most women who have never trained before, if you're thinking, oh, okay, they can just start with the bar with anything. They may not be able to. They may like the bar may be in its vertical post and like that little rogue kind of like 9-hole punch thing. And then getting that bar out of the rack to set it up for squats may be like too big of an objection barrier to do. Because it's like, I don't want to embarrass myself trying to wield this 45 unwieldy pound spear around basically in the gym. So starting weights, I think, need to be really considered. Like I really hate it when I go into a gym and they don't have like a Bella bar or a 25-pound bar or something like that for a lot of women to start out on. Chase, do you run? I'm assuming you guys have solutions for this at the franchise gyms, right?
We do. Our lightest bar is 5 kilograms, and even that, like we have something even lighter, and it's a wooden dowel. I've took many people in just our gym alone without a bar, just doing bodyweight squats, goblet squats,
Hmm.
to a high box. And again, you kind of hit the nail on the head where if you don't see those elements and those tools in a gym, it's not a good gym to be at.
Yeah, for real. I think like the inclusivity in training, it's like we need to be getting all people to exercise. It really needs to be like accessible in modality, and like we think it's really accessible because picking up a 45-pound bar, it's not really a big deal. But like if you bring in like most women, and because most humans in general are undertrained, and then people who are smaller are going to have a hard time with a 45-pound bar. So if you're like an untrained 120-pound female, you're trying to pick up a third of your body weight and kind of like a hammer curl 2 feet in front of you, like it may not work out super well. So even setting up things like safeties, like a 20-pound safety on a rogue rack, is going to be a little bit of a big deal. Finding a good starting point, and also the misconception. I think people think that weights are really heavy. I'm sure, Chase, you see this all the time, where someone will be like, "Oh, a 200-pound deadlift, that'll never happen. That's crazy. That's
Oh, yeah.
200 pounds." And I think with women, especially when it's like, yeah, we're just going to add 5 pounds a week, and who knows, and maybe in a few months you'll be squatting 135. That's like the craziest thing that people have heard. That can be pretty
Mhm.
off-putting, I think.
Just, yeah, whenever they look at and they see a real 45-pound weight, and they just think that they'll never ever be able to touch it. Like it's just gonna collect cobwebs in the corner in the weight tree because they're
Hmm.
just gonna stick to the fives and tens. When in reality, 3 weeks and they're pulling with 135.
Hmm. Yeah. The pull kind of accelerates really quickly. I think a lot of people don't realize that for sure. And I think basically just kind of like with what exercise has been inundated in the media, where it's kind of like jazzercise, Pilates, yoga, all of that stuff. If there is a weight, there sometimes are, but it's like a medicine ball and it's 10 pounds. And a lot of times, even like the dumbbell classes, it's always you're grabbing the smallest dumbbell or the smallest kettlebell. So those things are definitely things to be aware of and work on. And then we have I don't want to get too bulky. That's a super common one. Have you heard this before, Chase?
Oh, like every single time someone walks in.
It's like
It,
I wish.
yeah, like I don't understand where the fuck someone
Uh,
heard this. I don't know if it was like Jillian Michaels, saying some stupid shit on like The Biggest Loser or something, but this conception needs to be finally put to rest. Like a woman to get bulky, and this is the thing in general for everyone too, is that if someone wants to bulk and add weight, it's so much harder than dieting and doing a bunch of silly exercises, right? So it's more work, right, for something that's never going to happen to you. So just get it out of your head that you're going to gain 25 pounds in the span of a week and you're going to look like a fat ass. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and kind of more specific body type to really put on a bunch of weight real fast.
yeah. This is something that I've seen a ton of. I think it's either from female bodybuilding,
Yeah.
um, possibly some of the CrossFit girls going around. If you see like female weightlifting, I'm not really sure where the popular image comes from, but where women will think that they will like dramatically increase in absolute size, because they'll use kind of words or the language more like toning up more than anything. That's a super common thing. Like, I just want to tone. I want to stay within my absolute size constraints. I don't want to buy new clothes, for example. I just want to kind of shift the ratio or body composition around. That's it's an easy objection to deal with because it's like this does not happen accidentally. And then me as a smaller guy, I think this is like a pretty handy one. Like anytime I visit any in-person client or see most human beings, I'm significantly stronger than them, but it's very possible I'm also a good bit smaller than them too.
Mhm.
So if I see a female who's like 140 pounds and it's like, hey, I'm 180 pounds and I can pull like five something, like look at me, I don't look like a crazy fat ass either. That's one of the reasons why like being in shape in the personal training industry or the coaching industry is definitely really helpful for that.
Exactly.
Um,
And
yeah.
that's why CrossFit sells so much is that, if you look at everyone in there, everyone's, kind of shredded. They look
Hmm.
really nice, but are they really strong? No. Like anyone there benching 185, let alone if they even bench, they're considered a god there. Like no one's squatting 315 or even pulling it. It's so funny whenever you kind of wake up and you see through the clouds. But I mean, yeah, sex sells in this industry, and CrossFit has it nailed down.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think I hate to rip on it to that level like Chase is. I think Chase, you may be being a little bit too mean.
I
A
am
little bit
fucking.
too mean. I think it's just like, you will never see the results that like dedicated strength or power athletes will have in kind of their respective sports. But I think it definitely is like a big perspective thing. Like my mother-in-law, for example, I worked with her once. We had her doing like a really good low bar squat. It was great. She went to a CrossFit gym like 3 weeks later. She's like, "Oh, I wanted to lift weights because you told me to, so I went to a CrossFit gym." And then they were like, "No, you can't squat. You don't have the mobility for it. Go back to a medicine ball squat." They took her out of her weightlifting shoes and they didn't want her to lean over. So it's like the squat was mechanically impossible for her now. So that's another thing we'll talk about is just kind of bad coaching a little bit later on. Basically, they had someone who was already ready and willing to exercise. They continue to get her exercising, but they completely changed what the progress could have been. CrossFit it's a weird place for that. Like you can meet a lot of CrossFit athletes who have been training for like a decade who can't pull 405. It's a little bit weird. A little bit weird. But yeah, I don't want to get too bulky thing. It doesn't happen accidentally. It's kind of a, abs are made in the kitchen type objection to training. This is a big one, safe training environments. And I think it ties into unsolicited advice. Some gyms kind of do like girl sections or girl only hours. And I know there are some female only gyms that exist out there. Chase, what are your thoughts on these guys?
I think it's safe, man, especially for someone who's as a female walking in and you've never done this before, and you see like-minded people coming in there and doing what you've been kind of dreaming about doing. It kind of creates, I hate saying this, but a safe environment. Um, Whereas, like, if you walk into, like, let's say, like, Metroflex, where Ronnie Coleman's basically dungeon is, like, you see just everything jammed together, nothing's fucking clean. It's a dungeon, right? And that's very off-putting for, the 45-year-old lady who's coming in because, her
She
son's
has
wanting
some
her to
knee
get on.
pain or
Yeah,
something like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Or like the 65-year-old grandmother who said that her daughter or son, someone of her relationship is arguing about getting her into the gym and getting her stronger. And
Mm-hmm.
there, it's going to be very, very difficult for her to even feel comfortable with doing barbells, let alone any machine in there.
Yeah. So like, I feel like in the gambit of why don't more women participate in resistance training, this is a really big one. It's basically just like if you go into like a standard gym and it's all black iron and it's not super well kept, and there's like one guy who's an employee and he's kind of an asshole, and it's just a bunch of guys banging weights around. It's kind of just always boys' night. You're probably not going to want to stay there. Not because there's some sort of like permanent war between men and women, but it's just like you hang out with people who are roughly similar to you. If you're the odd man out, you probably won't stay there for very long. So creating that like seed of a community is really important, which is why I think like women's powerlifting clubs, weightlifting clubs are all, great. I think there should be more of them. And if, girls are watching this, they should try to start them on their own. But I think the unsolicited advice one falls into this, so it's like, I remember when I was new to resistance training at all, I would have guys come up to me all the time and be like, "Hey, you clearly don't know what you're doing. Do you want help? XYZ, I should help you on this at the college gym." And I was very appreciative of it because I was like, yeah, I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I weigh 139 pounds, like help a brother out. But when it comes to girls, there's always that angle of like, is this guy, hitting on me? Am I going to end up on Dateline? What's going to happen here?
Mhm.
That happens in the commercial gym. How do you feel like most people deal with unsolicited advice, Chase?
How they deal with it is that they'll listen, or they seem like they're intently listening, and then they'll look for an escape to end the conversation short and never show up at that gym again,
Yeah.
especially how bad the person is giving that unsolicited advice, how creepy he is, if he's too close, type shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also, it could even be a personal trainer trying to sell you on their package, be like, "Hey, you're doing that wrong. You're going to snap your shit up. You should buy some personal training sessions, things like that." There's just so many ways for that situation to go wrong. It's just like I always say, it's like there's no one really likes unsolicited advice. Most people like unsolicited friendship. So if you're like a charismatic person and you can just go and talk to people and just say, "Hey, how's your day going?" to everyone in the gym. If you have a small gym, that's a great place to start. Because if you see them 5 or 6 times and they know you're a normal person, they're likely going to be more receptive to you saying, "Hey, your hips are a little bit low on a deadlift." But I think most women fear this and consider this like a high priority of like, I don't want random guys coming up to me in the gym, because it happens. It happens to guys, but I'm sure it's totally different for women when it happens as well. I guess we'll move on now. All right, so differences in we're going to go through differences in coaching form, and then the big one is programming. What do you think the biggest differences are for coaching women, Chase?
It's guys as coaches being really apprehensive about touching and giving tactile cues to women.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big one, and it's funny because looking back on it, I was kind of the same way, especially like on the bench. You got women laying down, and you tell them to touch the touch point about like where their xiphoid process, their sternum, kind of right where her boobs are, and you just are like looking around for like a pencil
A
to.
landmark.
Yeah, you're just like, you're just like in this little general area. But then once
Yeah.
you just, and this is kind of goes back into like that unsolicited advice or so. It you're being apprehensive, you being unconfident about what you're doing comes off as being creepy or just plain old like I don't know what the hell this guy's doing. So if I got a client and she's squatting terribly low and I go, no, stop, cut it off, and I physically put her in position and I don't make it awkward, I point out what I need to do, I do it quick and I do it efficiently and very experienced, nothing happens. But guys who are just now learning and hopefully are on the path to becoming a coach, they'll kind of stumble on some stuff, they'll hold the person there and while touching them and just kind of make an ass
Just
of themselves. Yeah,
yeah.
so then that makes it kind of awkward. Like the lady's kind of just looking back and forth from the apprentice to me, and I'm just kind of like shaking my head, laughing a little bit. So she knows it's okay, but for the vast authority of
Yeah.
tactile cues, it's kind of hard for a new coach to kind of just not make it awkward.
Yeah, I operate on a few pretty set rules about all this stuff. If you don't use tactile cues with men, don't use them with women all of a sudden. It should be the same exact cues across both people, at least in terms of tactile cues. Like I'm not going to tell a guy like, okay, you're benching, touch the underwire of your bra. He's never worn a bra as far as I'm aware. He's not going to know where that is. So it's just like with tactile cues, I always will never use like a lot of finger. I'll use either like palm or knuckle because basically I'm trying to get someone to be aware of a specific location. So like let's say for guys, like he was talking about, you're trying to identify the touch point in the bench. If it's a guy who I know who isn't a baby, you can take your knuckles and just like dig it into his sternum and it will hurt for like 10 seconds. So when he's benching, he can touch that spot that's hurting. That's totally fine. You can't do that to a girl. Right.
No.
So it's just like it's that would be a can of worms and a half.
Yeah.
So like with things like that, you have to come up with different cues. So even when saying things like nipple line or underwire of the bra, or basically it's just like the bottom point of the cleavage of the bra, like those are all landmarks from top, middle, and bottom that you can use that are non-controversial. Just don't say them like a creep. If you're a creep, you're not going to be a successful coach anyways, because this is kind of a charisma-based job in the first place. But with tactile cues, like even the hip drive one, for example, like you can use the heel of your palm to press into basically kind of like their sacrum to say like, hey, or excuse me, like the bottom of their spine, be like, all right, this is where you should press up to for hip drive, or you basically can use hands like this. So it's like, let's say you are teaching hip drive from the starting strength model, you don't like grab their butt like this, for example, you can just use kind of the blunt of your hands to do it. Same thing gets accomplished. Tactile cues can kind of really speed those things up. What do you think about like tone? Chase, how do you think you speak to or coach women differently on like tone or command or authority?
Oh yeah, especially this is true even for like the older trainee. If I have a woman who's I somehow got her in and she's still very apprehensive, and she's in the squat rack doing her thing, and then a guy next to me, he's doing a heavy set of 5, and I'm over there yelling at the top of my lungs, like she's gonna get real put off. So it's gonna be hard in that scenario. But if I go back and she's doing her set and I just talk to her like how I am right now in this podcast, it's a nice general and commanding tone. I'm not being a dickhead and just yelling at her. I'm getting her to move the way I want her to move, but in a nice and controlled manner. That really, really is a big one. That again, starting out, you have to learn through trial and error, right? And really good clients,
Yeah.
and really, sometimes you'll get that chick who's in there who kind of has a little bit of some lady balls, and she'll be like, "Look, you just need to calm down," or just kind of just has this weird off-put demeanor on her face, so where you kind of fucked up, right? So then you got to
Mhm.
attack it a little bit more calmly and more professionally.
Yeah, this exists for guys as well. This kind of span and spectrum, and I think a lot of it has to deal with how experienced the lifter is. Really inexperienced lifters don't respond positively to cueing because they will be overthinking about what your cue means and not understanding it. The more of a wombat, motor moron, whatever you want to call them, is. So it's like if you take the most unathletic male and female on the planet, cueing them intricately during the set, that's going to fuck them up, basically. So like using interset instruction to be like, hey, this set, this is our pre-flight checklist to make sure our hands are here. That's all we want to have happen. And then after that, we're focusing on this one thing, this one task. That's a really great place to start because it's like you can still like display kind of a commanding or an authoritative tone to kind of keep the coaching relationship there. But it doesn't have to be like yelling at them. You don't need to scream hips at them when they're coming out of the bottom. Like it's probably not going to help anyways. So I think that's kind of a big experience thing. And I always have a hard time with women who are a lot older than me because I just think of my mom. I don't know about you, Chase.
Really? No.
Good, yeah, because if I talk to like some 60-year-old lady, I'm like, yeah, she just reminds me of my mom. I feel like whenever I'm coaching her, I'm like being overly nice the entire time, especially when I don't need to be.
No, I've never
Whereas
had that.
that's good for you then. There you go. But like I know with older guys, I have zero fucks given whatsoever. I'm like I will coach them as aggressively as I need to get it done. With older women, I'm always trying to. I think I'm a little bit too nice sometimes.
Yeah, I'm nice on them, but like I'm not having this weird like, oh, this is my grandmother. So I'm
Grandma,
in like
no.
Sunday school, yeah, like being really nice and
Uh,
cheerful. Like, but like I kind of have a sailor's mouth, and with guys and over guys, totally fine. Some
yeah.
women you can slide past, but the vast majority, man, you got to watch your verbiage. You got to make sure that you clean it up, and you're not um, just making it a fool of yourself.
Oh, I never swear in coaching. Do you swear in coaching, Chase? You got a potty
For
mouth?
queuing.
In between sets, not
Uh,
during queuing.
no,
I'm
okay,
not
yeah,
saying you yell swear words at people.
it's no, I'm not like you drive your
Yeah.
fucking head. No, I don't do that.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just talking to them, I'll be like, man, this thing
Get your
really
shit
pissed me
together.
off. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm never like, yeah, where it's like,
Like, listen, Meredith, get your fucking act together.
yeah,
That
it's
does
like
not.
Al Pacino and fuck, what was that movie? But where he's like the
Every movie
football
that
player.
he's in,
Yeah, basically.
literally everyone.
Yeah, I'm just
Um,
cussing at them like they're my teammates.
mhm. Yeah. So coaching, there's definitely some differences. I think a lot of it has to do with age. A lot of it has to do with experience level of the lifter. At the end of the day, it's not super different. I would say that tactile cues are definitely different because you have sometimes less tools. I want to say someone at one of the Starting Strength Coaches Association on a presentation had a good one about this. I want to say maybe it was John Petrizzo. I'm not sure. But
Oh
talking
yeah,
about we're talking
yep.
about how like aim your nipples at the floor and using that as a cue for someone in the squat because most people know where they are and they know they can lean them down, and about how trying to figure out a different cue to get someone to lean over. And then his was try and get your glasses to fall off, right? So if you have
Yep.
glasses on your face as you lean forward, you want to try and get them to fall off for the back angle of the squat. It's things like that. You need to be creative with it. And then now things like form, what do you think are some of the big form differences that you'll find, or at least basically, like issues within each exercise?
Definitely setting the low back with women. If you get like a really small, petite woman and she's just used to already setting her back in extension, if you kind of cue it or just pointing out, she'll probably overemphasize it.
Mm-hmm.
And probably more so, she already can overextend the back. So you're going to have to teach her not to overextend it. Whereas guys, it's going to be the opposite. I've never felt this sensation before. Basically, anything on the posterior dealing with their ass, they
Yeah.
don't want you to grab. They don't even want to think about it. Right? It's just for shitting, and we leave it alone.
They're completely unaware of their spine's position in
Yeah.
space. I always like to say, for most women, back extension is like a native feature. It is not something that you have to really teach.
Hmm.
It happens pretty intuitively for most of them. Almost always in the squat, the deadlift, it's kind of different because if it gets flexed on the way down, they may not be able to pull it out. But the squat with back extension, it's not something to focus on too much. So that's something in both in coaching and in form where it's like you'll normally have to cue more about the abs, more about like the front side of the body more than the rear side. Now, upper back musculature in relationship to the low bar squat. One of the reasons why most women they'll try high bar squat at first is because they don't have a lot of muscle in the low bar to kind of support that shelf. Where it's like if you take a nice jack guy, you get him to bunch his back together, he'll have like an inch and a half of rear delt for the bar to literally sit on. If you take a very untrained person or a very small man or a very small woman, that will happen as well. So that's something you have to focus on. What do you find that normally happens with that, Chase? Like if you have like a 130-pound girl who comes in, no muscle on her upper back whatsoever, trying to low bar squat.
I try to cue it and fix it with just making her arms basically touch her delts.
Yeah, the grip's always so narrow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like the grip is basically like her hands are literally touching behind her head.
Yeah.
And that helps it for a while, but again, we have to kind of go back into like the thing where again it's that reoccurring theme of I don't want to get too bulky, and I ask her to eat a little bit more. That's almost impossible for women to comprehend that.
Yeah, that's going to be like the last part is going to be talking about diet.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
a crazy. That is like. I don't think it's really an objection or like a hurdle. It's just kind of this big cultural thing. I don't even really know how to place that. But upper back musculature in the low bar squat, like it can make most people's times with the low bar squat quite hard. Like with larger, older guys, it's going to be getting your hands basically behind this position. They haven't put their arm behind them for any reason in the past decade and a half. That's going to be hard enough in the first place. Whereas for women, it's just like we need something to hold the bar on your back. They're used to using a squat pad. They're used to putting a towel around the bar, something like that. Yeah. And then in terms of grip strength, I think grip strength seems to be, or at least when I start people on their deadlifts, their hands will fail first before anything else, even if it's like mixed grip.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes for both sexes here, but it's kind of more prevalent in the female case, just due to like just the general size of a female hand. Like I've never met a woman whose hands are bigger than mine. It's just just anthropometry and just how we're built, right?
Yeah.
So gripping a normal 28 and a half or 29 millimeter bar, it gets pretty difficult for women, especially as the woman is more petite, a lot smaller. Generally, I don't really have a problem with some of the bigger girls, but they'll go through a lot more grip changes, right? We're kind of messing with hook grip a little bit more, we're mixed gripping or even strapping their arms.
Yeah. So yeah, the hand size, it's a huge one. It's like if you're 5'1" and you have very small hands, a barbell can be like quite thick in your hand. I think a large part of it about it is that most men, no matter what, will do some sort of arm training if they're interested in exercise, right? So that guy may have been fucking around with curls, chin ups. He may have been like recreationally going to the gym one time a week. He may work on cars on the weekend, anything like that. The baseline strength for grip strength, even if like the hand size isn't super desperate, or it's just like this person's a ranked novice and they don't train, his hands are probably still going to be significantly stronger, or at least by a ratio. Pete, had a question. He said, with women, what is the hierarchy of cue priority on the squat? Balance, depth, back angle. It's not different than men at all.
Yep. It's always, in this situation, it's always depth, right? Because if they're squatting anything that's not below parallel, it's not a squat. It's just them bending their knee and then coming back up.
I would say that like I think the question is probably more like what's prevalence of errors. I would say prevalence of errors normally stems from like upper back and rack position, because just holding the bar is hard if you don't have a lot of muscle on your upper back. And then that can cause some down chain things, like trying to keep your chest too vertical, trying to shove your head up to help hold the bar on your back. And then, what do you think, Chase? Is kind of too vertical of a chest angle? Is that a common problem, do you think, for women? Or do you...
More so I see is just like I'm getting a lot of women who will just kind of dive bomb that stuff. It's
dive bomb. That's
like
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super flexible. You kind of almost have to teach them and cue them to be tight. Start cutting off the range of motion towards more efficient. A lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Going too deep in the squat for people who are very flexible. If you consider that to be like a problem that's high priority, you're going to see it everywhere, because it's just like I remember a lot of women, that I'll coach you, be like, okay, I need you to lean over, shove your knees out. When you're sufficiently wide, you'll feel like a stretch in like the hamstrings, the adductors, and they'll just say, I don't feel that at all.
Yeah, and then you look like a goofball because he asked that, and you're just like, okay, well, you're just going to squat to this height.
Yeah, you're going to squat to this height. It's something that will mature out over time. That's something that's definitely very different, where it's like some guys, they'll be like, I feel a bounce or feel a stretch in their hamstrings and their groin and everything when they're like, 50% of the way down. And they'll be like, I'm already starting to feel it. And then those people have entirely different cue sets. Definitely different stuff on form. Anything very notably different on kind of like the upper body movements, bench press, do you think?
More so just they're going to start out lighter. Females are, and due to just the musculature associated in that area, right? We don't have breasts as males, so our pecs are way more developed. So just take into that account that you are going to need a little bit of some lighter utensils, and just kind of ingenious ways of progressing the press at the start or the bench at the
Hmm.
start.
Yeah, and I think one thing it's just like so we take this for granted. Guys do about like all of a touch and go bench press can really be the touch can be quite a good bit. Like if I was benching today, I was doing a bunch of hard doubles on rep 2. There was a lot of force that was being transferred into my pecs that deflated my rib cage a little bit, and that elasticity helped me drive it off the chest. And even if you're doing a pause bench, you can sit a lot of weight on your pecs to help you settle into the bottom, stay tight, and punch it back out. For women, most of their benches are going to be soft touch bench presses. So like if you're like Jennifer Thompson, one of her favorite variations is she calls like the t-shirt press. Go down, touch your t-shirt, don't let it touch your skin, and then press it back up. It's a really great variation for controlling the bottom position. A lot of women just bench press like that automatically. They do not let the bar sink into their chest whatsoever for obvious reasons. So the movement you can have a lot of different expectations for it. So like if you're coaching a girl and then you're just trying to get her to bounce out of the bottom, that may not be feasible, right? So those are things to think about. When do coaches take a lady to? Yeah, that's a good question. We'll go over this one in a second, Pete. Leave Pete's question on the board there. He said, when do coaches take a lady from 5s to 3s in novice programming? Anything on the overhead press form wise? How do you feel about the hips and Olympic press?
It just kind of depends on the individual. It doesn't, regardless of sex.
Yeah.
Some people are better at timing stuff. Some better are, or some are worse rather than the timing. And it just kind of goes back to just if the person was naturally athletic or not.
Yeah. I think I'm very biased in this one. I find that girls are oftentimes a lot better at kind of getting the hang of the press 2.0 or the Olympic press because there is a little bit of a rhythm to it and kind of the timing of the sequence. And if you can kind of explain that to them, they pick that up way easier, I find. All right, we'll move on here. Programming. This one probably will eat up a chunk of time. Chase, do you want to kick us off with intensity and volume?
Yep. So as we've seen as strength training coaches or just coaches, we see that as we progress women, right, they have a hard time handling 5s. And this kind of goes back to Pete's question. So we can kind of declare it as they're really good at handling intensity, right, but not relative intensity in the sense that a woman's 1 rep max is always going to be lighter than a man's, just due to utero and just them developing with estrogen versus testosterone. But what's cool about it is that it's so, I'm sorry, I have these kind of messed up, is that they're way better at handling volume than they are intensity, right? So with the volume aspect, they can handle a higher intensity relative to what the male counterpart. So let's say, we got both sexes, both of their 1 RM for their squat is 100 pounds. If we were going to do a back offset, right, a lady can handle a higher intensity on their back offset versus a male due to just how much motor unit recruitment they're adding in and all the musculature involved into that. They're getting less stress essentially with that 1 RM event.
Yeah, yeah, that's a decent way of saying that. I think a lot of people will move this into the second point. So the first 3 points are all intricately related, and I'll pop these back up so that people can see this. So intensity versus volume, that relationship, absolute body size, kind of recovery functions tying into that, and then absolute load. So like 125 pound man and 125 pound woman, what those differences would be like, as well as with like larger size lifters. So let's say, for example, Chase's top deadlift for like a triple, let's say on an average day of training, it's 575 to 630. Let's say somewhere in there, he's doing his good job with his deadlifts. That absolute loading with him being such a large athlete, 6'2", 245, that is going to be significantly more taxing than a very strong 125 pounder's 315 pound deadlift, right? So if you're 125 and you can pull 15, you're strong as shit, right? But the thing is that the absolute loading in there on all of your harder tissues that aren't super disparate, so like bone, tendon, ligament, all of that stuff, it's just really not receiving the same relative amount of stress. The axial loading is just significantly less. And then on top of that, like Chase was saying, the back offs are going to be much less disparate. So the back off percentage can be like 5%, Like if you're doing, let's say, doubles, top doubles in the bench with a female, let's say she's doing 85 pounds, she may do like 85 for 3 doubles, and then her back offs for like a set of 5 could be literally 80 pounds. It doesn't have to go down to 75. Where it's, say Chase is benching, he's benching 365 for his top doubles. If he wants to walk that down to sets of 5, that may be 290 after all of those heavy doubles, right? Because the thing is, it's not only the like chronic stress that you're considering, it's the acute stress on recovery functions. So like the literal amount of oxygen that Chase is using on like a set of, he'd say he's squatting 405 for 12 reps, right? The amount of oxygen that Chase is using on that 12 RM is hugely disparate, all those little cellular resources, than let's say that 125 pound lifter squatting, let's say 135, 185 for 12, right? So all of those things really factor into programming. And it's something that you'll learn if you program for a lot of women, is that like the relationship, you should do this with everyone, but the relationships that you'll find with intensity and volume, you're going to find out that it's just like they can probably handle back offs that are pretty close to their top sets. They can probably handle a whole lot of work, more work than you think that they're going to have in the first place. Chase, anthropometry, we were talking about this one before the show. How do you feel about this?
The most of the time that I see as women, how they're built, yeah, a lot of them have long legs and a generally short torso. So that kind of affects some stuff, especially with pulling and stuff. So you have to be really creative with how their stance is, angling at the toes, making sure that they're not getting their hips essentially higher than their shoulders.
To start, what does anthropometry mean, by the way, just for everyone at home?
Basically, body length, how you're built. So let's say, like, if I'm 6'2", my legs are, let's say, 3 feet, and then my torso is, a little over 3 feet. So then that kind of makes me equal or somewhat symmetrical. Really, no one's built like that, but you kind of get the point that your legs make up a certain height of your total height, your arms do too, and stuff like that, and your torso. So kind of you take this into account as coaching and stuff, and then this kind of sets the angles, our diagnostic angles that we're looking for. And you'll generally see that, yeah, women have really short torsos and really long legs. Their femurs are real long or so. And this kind of makes it a little bit tricky with, such exercises as the deadlift or any pulling and stuff like that. Squatting and stuff like that, you'll see a little bit more horizontal back angle with women and stuff like that.
Yeah. So like anthropometry basically being, like Chase was saying, it's like all of our segment lengths. So like the ratio between like your calf to your thigh and the ratio of, like your pelvis to your shoulders and all that good stuff. It really changes the lifts. A lot of people don't realize that. And like most of the shit testing that you'll be doing for the platform exam is kind of being able to analyze someone's anthropometry and then cue around that, because they're going to give you the oddballs. So like someone in the long leg gang or the short torso club, they're going to have a deadlift that looks pretty different than someone who's built like an otter. They have one really long tubular torso and then short stumpy legs. Those people are really great at certain tasks. The long-legged people are really good at certain tasks. So kind of figuring out who's good at what, and then programming around that. I would say that squats, we're trying to dissipate some of that femur length. So I tend to go a little bit wider for them. And then try to get the knees to travel a little bit farther forward if we can. Basically, we're just kind of opening the thighs up. The pelvis is normally flattering with this as well, because I think women tend to have wider pelvises. They're a little bit more angled outwards. So for them, they can really take kind of like a wide, more sumo style of squat. We can dissipate that femur length so they don't have to bend over and squat like this. Same thing with the deadlift, going with like either a wider stance or a narrow stance with the knees really shoved out to kind of let that happen. Same thing with like a rack pull. A rack pull may be useful just to kind of get them out of that sticking point. Because like legitimately, you'll meet some women where if they're doing a quote unquote proper deadlift setup, their shoulders will be slightly below their hips, and that just sucks. It's a really great stimulus on like the glutes and hams and lower back, but if they're trying to pull a ton of weight, it's it kind of sucks to deal with. Do you find this happens a lot or there's any other variations on overhead press and what's it called? Bench press in terms of anthropometry?
Maybe just depending on like how large the woman's breasts are. And that kind of just depends on like the range of motion and stuff and how well they arch and stuff. But generally speaking, no, not really. Like it's pretty rare to meet a woman who has really long arms. Most of it is pretty short arms. Angling the grip is still the same with both the press and the bench. The touch points again kind of varies with just the size of the breast and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Have you noticed anything different?
I was going to say the same thing about the arms. I notice, like, I don't meet a lot of girls with like very positive ape indexes. So it's like, let's
Mhm.
say that, the ape index being your finger span, so your arm span as compared to your height. I'll meet a lot of guys with like super lanky arms. I will not meet a lot of women with very lanky arms. That may
Yep.
have to deal with something sort of like in utero testosterone exposure. I'm not really sure. But like, I think I see that a lot in the climbing community. Like, if you see a girl with super long arms, it's like a lot more rare, I think, than guys with very long arms. There are I have a lot of guys where it's like they finish their deadlifts like 3 inches above their knee. I think most women finish their deadlift. It's just basically it's like above the front of their hip, or basically at their
Yeah.
hip pointers almost.
Hmm.
Um, so that's something to definitely consider. Is that like the range of motion on the deadlift may be significantly longer than most men's. And then starting points. In terms of like overhead press versus the deadlift, where do you find, let's say, if you take a 35-year-old woman walks in off the street, where do you start her overhead press at, Chase?
Usually we will end with 3 sets of 5 around 33 pounds, which is
33.
pretty
And
good. Yeah.
that's the Bella bar basically.
No, it's the woman's 15 kg.
Okay.
Well, then we have, like here at our gym, we have a 5 kg, a 10 kg, 15 kg, and then of course the 20, normally 40,
Hmm.
45 pound bar. Yeah, if she's, fairly fine with the movement pattern, can actually throw her hips and gets the timing roll down. Yeah, about 33 to just about 40 pounds within that range is where we usually start on the press.
Yeah, 45 pounds starting, like starting on the press for a female. That's very high. That's like
Yep.
that girl has been training a decent bit in the overhead patterns already. I would say that's somewhat rare just to be able to do that off the bat. Yeah, I'd say the older you are, the more sensitive that gets. Absolutely, but I would say somewhere in the 30s for sure. Where do you think a deadlift starts at for most girls? Just walking off the street, we'll say is that the same 35-year-old woman.
Around 65, 85.
Okay.
It's a little bit over the bar, but it's again not very high. A lot of it to do is just they women have never really trained their back and stuff like that, whereas men, we've are more suitable to like manual labor, so we're over there hunching around, bending and stuff, and
Yeah.
I kind of hate to say it like that, but we've done something with our backs, right? Whereas even yes, with a very athletic woman through sports, their musculature has been adapted to somewhat of a stress. It's not the same as a guy's, and they always usually start out around 65, again 85, 95, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'd say 95 first day female for a deadlift is like it's pretty big. Either the woman has to be like large, again we're going back to the absolute
Yep.
body size thing, like programming differences between someone who's 125 pounds, it's not terribly disparate between men and women. There just aren't very many men who are 125 pounds,
Yep.
just doesn't really happen. But yeah, so it's just like if you grew up in the north, and then say if you have a daughter and a son, and the son is shoveling his driveway, 5-7 times a week to get out of the house in the
Hmm.
morning, his deadlift baseline is just going to be higher when he starts training when he's 20 years old, as opposed to the daughter who hasn't done anything else in her life. Even if they're both like young and virile, and there's no other bad factors. Just like I think there's a lot of cultural differences in the amount of physical activity that men and women do, unfortunately, and that really carries over. And we kind of see its expression here.
Yep.
So yeah, starting points are definitely for sure different. What about the squat, Chase? What do you think the squat normally starts at?
Hmm.
It's a tricky one.
Usually, yeah, it is. Again, this kind of just depends, because then you can get some really petite, small girls to kind of surprise you. Um, I want to say around at least a good 105,
Okay,
somewhere.
nice. Yeah, that's a. It's I would say that as well. Like most girls can squat more than you think. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because again, I would say like exercise history. It's a lot of elliptical. It's a lot of treadmill. It's a lot of lower body focused exercise
exactly.
classes. So they'll come in with that baseline. It's like guys will come in with a baseline for benching, for example.
Yep.
Most guys will have fucked around with benching and pull-ups and curls, and they may have never squatted in their life. Whereas most girls will have done seemingly to have
Hmm.
done some sort of leg dependent, and a lot of that's coming from cardio too. Like Rip says that in the book. He's like, if you put a novice on an exercise bike, their squat will go up.
Yep.
So you definitely see that for sure. So we covered bench press, deadlift. How do you feel about power cleaning and all that stuff? How often do you find that you're teaching girls that?
To even let me teach them, it's kind of a fiasco. They're really hesitant about that. But
Yeah.
for those that allow me to teach them, again, it's usually about, put it in kgs, around like 25, 30 kg. No, I wouldn't say 30. About 20 to 25 kg.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that about the same thing as well. So it's like if I'll start with like a light bar if I can work up
Yeah.
to the normal barbell, the normal 20 kilo barbell. That's a great win for a first time power cleaning session because again, the smaller body size and everything. Um, I think one of the biggest objections to getting girls to start a lot of the Olympic lifts is the bar hitting you in the collarbones. I think
Yep.
that I run into that every time I have taught a female to clean. It could be my bias as a coach, I'm sure, but that's something that I run into chronically. Chase, do you find that too?
Yeah, and I think it's just something to do with it. Again, like a lot of women don't like loud noises in the gym, and you over there cueing her to really stomp, be really aggressive, violent, and it's just not suitable for them, and they kind of get put off by it. But as soon as they do it correctly, it's like, hey, this wasn't a big deal. Just do it
Hmm.
more.
Yeah, you figured it out. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's any differences in like the teaching progression there, or the mechanics or anything like that. I think it's just willing to take up space and be loud in the gym. That's pretty rare for a lot of people. Most people aren't super
Hmm.
comfortable with that. And then the bar hitting you. I'll run into the same thing with very low body weight guys. Like if you find like a
Yeah.
135-pound guy hitting the 45-pound barbell hitting you in the shoulders can be uncomfortable for sure. And then I guess we'll move to Pete's question here. Pete, if you're still hanging around, when do coaches take ladies from fives to threes in novice programming? So let's say if you're on the novice LP, things are slowing down. When do you switch to threes, Jace?
At any point that their set of five really starts to grind, and that could be just, again, it depends on the woman. But let's say we have a gal who's of fair age, 30s, normal body type. She's coming in and she squats, let's say 90 or 85 the day prior. It was fine. Now this session, she's 5 pounds heavier, but you can tell like the first three, not a problem. And then four
Mm-hmm.
and five are just, it's almost like we slapped on another 10 or 15 pounds and they kind of just slow down. At that point, I go, hey, we'll count that as two triples and we're going to finish out with three more triples. Or if you can kind of see that a little bit prior, like let's say she again just completed that set of three sets of five at 90, but they're kind of grindy. That next session, boom, we're going to the triples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ideally you want to try to get ahead of it a little bit to avoid any sort of like either catastrophic failure or just too much of a fatigue cost.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I would say, Pete, for that. It's just like whenever things start slowing down. I think with smaller under muscled people, that bar speed wall that Chase is talking about, where it'll be like totally fine, slightly slow, and then dropped off the face of the earth in terms of bar speed, you just want to cut it off at that sweet spot and then move on. And honestly, I consider it's just like, the threes will last a pretty decent amount of time. But I'm more willing to go to intermediate or to more complex programming. So it's like you're going to do threes until they also hit that bar speed wall. And then we can take 5-10 pounds off and you could probably do fours or fives at that point,
Yeah.
just to get your total workloads in. I don't
A
think
lot
there's
of,
no one. What was that?
so a lot of this too is like especially like the people that I deal with is that, with an older trainee female or just an older person in general, like you don't want them to grind too much or just feel off putting that
Yeah.
like we've gotten too heavy too quickly and I'm never going to make any more progress. So I'll flip it. I'll make subtle changes ahead of time to where they're not really grinding. Even though, yes, we want them to complete the reps, finish out strong with sets of five. But if you're really trying to milk it, it's not going to go well with a female or an older trainee.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was a little insightful tidbit there of saying or older trainee because a lot of these things also apply to people who are kind of
Yeah.
have those sharper bar speed drop offs, and a lot of those people are older. Um, yeah, so things like that for sure. Um, Anything else you want to talk about programming wise? Considerations for training for females?
As I mean, this is going to be kind of a weird point, but it happens as get more clientele and just dealing with an extensive clientele. It's just that time in the month, right? making sure that you're comfortable with your client about talking about that. In weird cases, making sure that the female isn't like going through some crazy stuff, right? If she's experiencing a bunch of cramps that day, or just she knows when her cycle is, just try to avoid it the best you can. Maybe program different days around it, and just know that recovery is going to be a real issue with her. So don't expect to like really like it just kind of goes more into like more intermediate and maybe advanced. Again, try to program around that and just know that
Mm-hmm.
maybe this week is a deload week, or we're working on something, a new exercise to where it's less stressful.
Yeah, yeah. Do your lifts beltless that week. Intra-abdominal pressure is probably going to be irritating. That's something where it's just like, you should be in communication if that person is comfortable with it. They don't necessarily have to be, but you should probably be able to pick up on it anyways if you're paying attention to it. But if you are a female lifter, or let's say if you're working with your wife or your girlfriend or something like that, it's probably not the time to push for PRs if it's really kind of a concern for that person. A lot of women have their menstrual cycle and it's literally nothing to them at all. You kind of figure out where we're on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Other women are laid out on their ass like they got hit by a truck. You got to figure it out. But I know there's definitely a research and literature body about force production during menstrual cycle recovery and all of that stuff. The exercise science is out there. I'm not super familiar with it, but I will say from like a practical in the trenches standpoint, you should be aware of it. Probably don't push for PRs. Auto regulate more. Like if you let's say even if a guy comes in with a bad stomach ache, it's basically the same exact thing. But yeah, I think that just about covers it. I think we kind of dug through most of the things that I would say. What are considerations for training for women? We kind of buried the lead a little bit there. I would say the programming is probably the most important part, and we did that like right at the end, right? Yeah. But yeah, the conversation on the objections and everything was pretty interesting to hear as well. But Chase, recap, where can we find you at?
Chase Lindley on Instagram, and then just look up the gym, call us, email us, and we'll reach out to you.
Show up in person. Saturdays are good. Yeah. How are those open houses normally go? So basically, it's just like there's the normal training on Saturday for people who train on Saturday, right?
So we have 3 classes, and they're all 3 or 90 minutes. First one starts at 7 to 8:30, 8:30 to 10, and then 10 to 11:30. But we want to schedule an open house around 10 to 12, so that way people actually can come in and look about and see what's actually happening and what they're signing up for.
Okay,
it also
that's
helps
really
me
cool.
too. It helps me too, so it's like I can grab like Becky over here,
right?
Who's, lifting, and she can actually talk about her experience with this and not shoot anyone off because we got a bunch of gorillas in there essentially slacking our way.
Yeah, everybody in the gym is an ambassador of the gym, and when you have like a small, tight-knit gym, it's really positive. That's cool that you guys have those open. I didn't know that was like an every week thing. Chase does online coaching. Reach out to him. I do online coaching as well. I stay off social media like the plague, but you can find me on my website there. If you have any questions, let me know. Email me. And if you want to get videos on the show, I think next time we'll probably just do another form check catch-up video because we missed doing them today. If you want to get videos on the show, you can email those to support@strength.club, and any questions for the Starting Strength app and all that stuff. To our boy Mick. But I think that's it. We're going to sign off for the night. And thank you all for watching.